all grant us serenity and peace, and allow us to get this understanding and deeper knowledge of his attributes and his names. Amin ya Rabbil Alameen. And the salatu wassalam ala Sayyidina Rasulillah alayhi salatu wassalam. All right, so today is our sixth session in our series about understanding more about God's attributes and holy names. And we were done with the names Allah. Today we'll be doing a set of three names together, and these are Al Malik, Al Malik, and Al Malik. In English, they are the king, the sovereign, and the owner, right? And the reason why they're combined together is for the fact that they do have, very similar meanings, yet they do have some differences as well. So today we'll be going through not only the definition of the names and the implication of the names, but also most importantly is that what we do in these sessions, which I think is very, very important, is that we're trying to see how to make use of these names, how to actually try and connect to these names. How can we live with the elaboration of these names and the manifestation of these names in our lives? So to start with, let me share with you today's presentation. And okay, so as you can see, we have the three names, Al Malik, Al Malik, Al Malik, and they even have the same sounds in Arabic. So the king, the sovereign, and the owner. All right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Now, the meaning of the name in relation to Allah. So the king, the sovereign, and the owner is the one who commands and whose command is executed in his dominion. For not every owner has his command executed or can act in what he owns. So this is how different the meaning is when we come to allocate it to God, subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is true that some people are labeled as kings, but the difference is that even though they're kings, some of their commands may not be followed. In God's case, of course, it's different because he is the one whose command is always executed in his dominion. So another thing is that the king is broader than the owner. The name, the king, is broader than the owner, and Allah, the Exalted, is the owner of all owners. Of course, we know, we talked about that before, that the word, that the name Allah combines all other attributes. So it's the most generative. We have that they have only obtained the ability to act in the possessions of him. The possessions from him. So whoever owns anything, they only have these possessions through God or from God. Number two is that the king, sovereign, and the owner, he is the owner of all things, having control over them without opposition or resistance. So that's the difference between number one and number two. Number one means that he has full command, full authority, and number two, it means that there's no opposition, even though it may appear that there are some people here on earth who actually resist his commands and they do things against his rules. But as a matter of fact, he has allowed this to happen because of, we talked about the deal. There is a deal. There is the good and the evil, and they have to be there hand in hand on earth. Otherwise, there would be no test. So the presence or the existence of evil is actually something that God has allowed to happen. Even though he allowed it, it doesn't mean that he accepts it, that he loves it. Of course he doesn't, but it's allowed by him. So number 3 says that the king, the sovereign, and the owner is the one who is self-sufficient in his essence and attributes, while every existing thing is in need of him. Self-sufficient. And God is the only who is self-sufficient by default. I mean, you may think that this person is wealthy, healthy, whatever, so he's self-sufficient. Actually, there's no such thing as self-sufficient here. It is always through him, because if God demands that tomorrow morning that same person would find himself paralyzed, see himself losing his money, and we have seen this happening over and over again. So if he declares it, if he demands it, it will happen, and that person would be stripped of all his abilities and strength and everything. So he is never really truly self-sufficient, but God is. Now, number 4, the king, the sovereign, the owner, he is the one who grants ownership to whomever he wills of his kingdom temporarily. Then the King of Kings takes it back at the time and in the manner that he desires. That's exactly what we were saying now, that ownership here in this life is temporarily, right? It only happens for a very limited time, but the only one who has it unlimitedly is God. Another thing is that the king, the sovereign, the owner is the one who is not contested in his dominion by any rival, nor opposed by any adversary. He acts in his kingdom with the power of an overwhelming authority. Right? And then the last point is that he's the one who governs his creation as he wills, with matters of command and prohibition, giving and withholding, taking and expanding, lowering and raising, honoring and humiliating, giving life, causing death, guiding and leading astray. So there is no one to overturn his decree nor to reject his judgment. This is the kind of God that we worship as Muslims. And once we get to know these attributes, we feel humble and we feel protected and we feel strong through him, not through us, ourselves. If we're left to ourselves, we are weak, we are needy, we are vulnerable. Having God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with these grand attributes, give us wealth, health, assistance, protection, right? We take that from him. So he is the source of all good. What about if he doesn't, if he decrees that some of these needs are not fulfilled? What if one day we find ourselves sick, another time we find ourselves poor, whatever? Again, this is part of the deal. Once we get to know the deal, what is it that we have agreed upon? What is it that God has actually told us would happen here on this earth? Once we recall this, everything else will be set in place. So he never told us that we will live a miserable kind of life, nor did he say that this life on earth would be heaven on earth. There's no heaven except in the thereafter. But here we have tests, we have ups and downs, and we need to worship him in both cases, and we need to understand the pain. And I think every session we go through again and again the message of pain. Why is there pain? Why is there some kind of test in this life? And it is never meant to be any kind of punishment to the believers. It is always some kind of guidance and some kind of purification to them. All right. Now, then, what is the difference between those three names? The Malik, the king, Malik, the owner, and the Malik, the sovereign. So the difference goes as follows. Malik, the king, is the one whose commands are executed in his dominion. So as we said before, that this is not something that happens to every owner. The term king is broader than owner, for the king has the authority to govern all that he possesses, making his ownership general. While al-Malik, or the owner, he has specific ownership. The king is the one who possesses the authority to govern his creation through his words and commands, while the owner acts through his actions. As for the Malik, or the sovereign, it is an intensified form for both al-Malik and al-Malik, encompassing the meaning of both. So these are, some of the differences, slight differences that we can find in those three names. What about the characteristics of Allah in these three names? So the true kingship, Allah alone is the king, right? So the true kingship belongs to the one who created everything and is unique in lordship and governance, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who has all sovereignty and authority, and to him belongs the ultimate matter. His dominion does not diminish with giving. It's so important, right? Let me recall some of the verses. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وقل الحمد لله الذي لم يتخذ ولدا ولم يكن له شريك في الملك ولم يكن له ولي من الذل وكبره تكبيرا. And it means, praise be to Allah, who has not taken a son, who has no partner in sovereignty, and no protector from humiliation. Meaning that when he decides to humiliate someone, there is no protector from that. No one would argue with this. So these are, again, some words in those verses that show his power and authority and sovereignty. Okay, so another one is تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير. Blessed is he in whose hand is dominion, and he is over all things competent. Another one is له الملك وله الحمد وهو على كل شيء قدير. To him belongs dominion, to him belongs all praise, and he is over all things competent. So there are many verses in the Quran that actually stress the idea, the fact that he is above everything all through. قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس. Right, so قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس, ملك الناس, the king of mankind. Right, so again, this is where we can find those names. But then comes this question. Before the question, he is the true king. He is not questioned about what he does. He is the doer in his kingdom according to his will, and nothing occurs in his kingdom except what he wills. All right. Now, but before that, there is an important question. It's not written here on the slides. Let me post it here in our discussion. Now, if he is the Lord, the King, the owner, then how about man? Does a man truly own anything? And the answer, of course, is that no, we did mention that, but let me stress it here, that a person does not truly own anything because their poverty and weakness are inherent to them, right? So the power and the ownership, they are allocated by God, but the weakness and poverty is what is inherent, is what is actually the default state in man. So, and this is shown, let me just discuss this here. This is actually shown in the verses that says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الناس أنتم الفقراء إلى الله والله هو الغني الحميد. O mankind, you are those in need of Allah, while Allah is the free of need, the praiseworthy. So a person begins as what? A person begins as a drop of sperm, then a clot, then a lump of flesh, and is then born naked, helpless, crying out for the necessities, bare necessities of life. So where's their ownership at that time? Moreover, at the moment of death, all of their possessions will not benefit them at all, nor will they extend their life ever for even one more minute. So where is their power? Where is their authority then? In reality, a person's ownership is merely a temporary loan because they are born empty-handed and live in the same state. Allah says, وَأَنْفِقُوا مِمَّا جَعَلَكُمْ مُسْتَخْلَفِينَ فِيهِ, and spend from that in which He has made you successors. Spend whatever. It's not only, it doesn't go for only money, by the way. You can spend from your wealth, you can spend from your time, right? So you can spend that in which He has made you successors. So He never said spend from what you own. Yet sometimes God would actually, lovingly, would give us this, label from, I think some of the verses He would say, أنفقوا, he would say spend from your own money, something of the sort, all right? In some verses, something like that was actually declared. However, this is only as a figure of speech, because in reality, He is the owner, but He is giving us these possessions, and then kindly, out of a kindness from Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala, He would attribute these possessions to us as if, and He would even give us thawab. He would give us, rewards for spending this money for good purposes, even though it is Him who benevolently gave us those possessions. One of the lovely verses that I love is this one. وَلَقَدْ جِئْتُمُونَا فُرَادَى كَمَا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ وَتَرَكْتُمْ مَا خَوَّلْتَكُمْ وَرَاءَ ظُهُورِكُمْ. And indeed, you have come to us alone, individually, just as we created you the first time. And you have left behind what we bestowed upon you. Right? And of course, you need to stop at that verb tense. He's using past tenses. It's like you've already come us alone. It's as if thereafter, the final day has already arrived. Because if it is going to happen, then He would actually, sometimes God would address this as if it already happened in the past, because of this kind of certainty that it will happen, but as if it happened already. And something else is the word furada, individually, alone, the idea of aloneness, not loneliness, aloneness, right? Because again, you get to feel that there is this kind of personal relationship with God, that you will be dealt with in person, individually. He sees you and only you. It's not like He sees, of course He sees us all, but again, there's this very special, treatment that He would bestow upon you personally. And when you go back, you will go back to Him individually. You'll not be going, you will not be standing there in front of Him in groups, but individually. And why is that? It's not only for God forbid that we will ever stand in front of Him for punishment, or for even to see how we it is one of our prayers to be, never to have this time with Him where He would ask you questions and He'd try to interrogate you, sort of. That in itself is torture. Right, because so we pray to God that He would just spare us these times when He would be actually, asking some people what they have done, and they would open their books and go through their actions. I mean, that in itself is horrendous. This is horrible. I mean, God, I hope, inshallah, ya Rab, that we will never be standing in this situation, and that we will be one of those very few chosen people that will be taken out of their graves onto paradise, with never ever having to go through, these times of calculations and going through our books and see what we have done. Because no matter how good you've done here, this idea that you're standing in front of him for that reason, for you to be asked questions by God, I mean, this is so. Another thing is, so this tells you all about how powerful, how grander God is, all right? And he says here, for example, we will move on to, unlike kings who diminish their dominion when they give, the true king, God subhanahu wa ta'ala, has treasures that do not diminish no matter how much he gives or bestows. So if you remember this verse that says, yeah, ibadi. I think this is holy hadith. يا عبادي لو أن أولكم وآخركم وإنسكم وجنكم قاموا في صعيد واحد فسألوني فأعطيت كل إنسان مسألته ما نقص ذلك مما عندي إلا كما ينقص المخيط إذا أدخل البحر. And the translation goes as follows. This is one of the holy hadith, not verses from the Quran. It says, "O my servants, if the first of you and the last of you, your men and your jinn, were to stand in one place and ask of me, and I were to give each one what he asked, that would never diminish what I have, any more than a needle diminishes the sea when it is dipped into it." This is the kind of God, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, that we have, and He's forever generous and bestows his generosity upon us. All right, so Ibn al-Qayyim, one of the biggest scholars, says that the essence of kingship is realized through giving, withholding, honoring, humiliating, rewarding, punishing, anger, satisfaction, dismissing, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, one thing and the other. So the fact that we have God, alhamdulillah, with all these attributes, this is something to really ponder about. And if, of course, the beautiful verse that says, قل اللهم مالك الملك تؤتي الملك من تشاء وتنزع الملك ممن تشاء وتعز من تشاء وتذل من تشاء بيدك الخير إنك على كل شيء قدير. O Allah, owner of sovereignty, you give sovereignty to whom you will and take sovereignty away from whom you will. You honor whom you will and humble whom you will. In your hand is all good. Indeed, you are over all things competent. You cause the night to enter the day, and you cause the day to enter the night, and you bring the living out of the dead, and you bring the dead out of the living, and you give provision to whom you will without account. The last part is beautiful. It tells you all about how that he could do one thing and the opposite at the same time, right? Or in different times. So this also tells you how powerful he is. And that is how different Muslims see God from, some Christians would, where they would only attribute all kinds of kindness and love to God without actually referring to the other side, which is the powerful side of God. So knowing that he has both, because God has created us, he knows us that as human beings, if we only see him as loving, caring, kind, and forgiving all through for all people, whether they believe in him or not, whether they torture the believers or not, whether they're good or bad, then I mean, that in itself, I mean, it will never be any kind of balanced image of God, because how can I actually worship someone, or I mean, how can I worship God if He doesn't actually punish the bad for their deeds? So punishment is an important attribute. All right. Yes. We go back to the PowerPoint right now because we stopped the sharing to discuss these points, and then we go back. All right. So yes. We move on to how do we worship Allah with His names, with those three names. There are several things that we need to do. First of all, just 1 second. So the first thing that we need to do is that we must believe that no one has the authority to benefit or harm you except the King, Al Malik. Therefore, you should live your life with integrity, speaking only the truth and acting only in accordance with the truth. And that made me pause for a while. The idea of truth and truthfulness. If you remember that hadith that Sayyidina Rasulullah said that a believer may even he may steal. A believer may actually commit adultery, and then, of course, he would repent. But I mean, he might fall into these sins. But when he was asked, would he lie, and he said no, and it was like, lying is much easier to be done than stealing, for example, or killing someone, or all that stuff. These are huge things. But why not lying? And then I found out it is because of that. Because if you lie, that means that you do not actually, you haven't fully grasped the idea that God is watching you, and you haven't fully grasped that, because when you lie, you're mostly lying out of fear. If you fear the person over God, then where are you placing God exactly in your life? That has to make you think. And those who tend to lie to get out of trouble, I know that this could be a habit. And then you need to at least be aware of the seriousness of this. And then you get to see how you can reform this later on. But you need to take the first step, which is to understand how serious this is. And the seriousness comes from the fact that lying cannot go side by side with believing in God being watchful of you, and God being over, He has all power. Because if you believe totally in that, you would never have to lie. You don't have to fear anything. Another thing is, you do not ask others to seek from anyone besides him. And you don't have to ask anyone for anything, for any kind of assistance. Yes, we may sometimes do that, okay? And there's nothing wrong asking anyone for some kind of assistance, as long as you know that the real possessor of all kinds of supplies that you need is God. So how can you ask from someone who possesses nothing and neglect the one who owns everything? Again, it doesn't mean that you will be sinful if you ask for kind of support or guidance, as long as you know that this person who's helping you is a tool that God has used to bestow upon you that kind of guidance. Another thing is, we must worship Him alone, just as we acknowledge Him alone in sovereignty. Another way of worshiping God through these names is by signaling Him out for absolute obedience. No one else deserves this kind of absolute obedience except God. And fearing Him, of course, regarding what we possess. And we must be certain that every kingdom in this world is transient. So again, the kind of transitional phase that we are in, that everything that we have, beauty, call it youth, wealth, you name it, is all transient. And we should invoke God with his names, Al Malik and Malik and Malik, in our prayers as well. So that is another thing that actually, when doing, it will strengthen your belief and the kind of link that you have with God. Another thing here is, if you remember the verses that have to do with that. Yes, there's this verse that is so important to ponder about. It says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فلا وربك لا يؤمنون حتى يحكموك فيما شجر بينهم ثم لا يجدوا في أنفسهم حرجا مما قضيت ويسلموا تسليما. But no, by your Lord, they will not truly believe until they make you, Muhammad, judge concerning that over which they dispute among themselves, and then find within themselves no discomfort what you have judged, and submit in full submission. Right? So this is the one that has to do with signaling him out for absolute obedience. Right? So this not only that, but whenever you are in a situation where you are in dispute with someone, or there's this kind of argument, and you're not sure what has to be done, if you go back to God and Sayyidina Rasulullah, and then whatever judgment there is, you don't find in yourself, in your heart, any kind of discomfort. So it's not only talking about the action that you need to take, which is to ask for guidance from Allah and his Prophet, but also not to find within you any kind of discomfort. This is not easy, by the way. For some people, this takes a lot of time to reach. But again, it is an indicator. Do I find myself at ease? Do I take God's commands with easiness? Or do I actually, go into some kind of struggle to get myself to obey his orders? And that is something that we need to consider. Another thing is, we must be certain, the one here that says that we must be certain that every kingdom in his world is transient. And for that one, if you remember the verse that says, everything will be destroyed except his face. His is the judgment, and to him you will be returned. كل شيء هالك إلا وجهه له الحكم وإليه ترجعون. Right? If you remember that, that would actually be some kind of relief when we face any kind of loss. Loss of money, loss of health, loss of whatever. The shock comes when we do not expect this to happen. But if we read the Quran the way we should read it, with tadabbur, with some kind of insight, then you get to see that he has declared it. He told us that everything that you have here is transit, is temporary. So, and the last thing is, if you remember when we said this last one, that we invoke Allah with his names, Al Malik, Al Malik, Al Malik, it is actually one of Sayyidina Rasulullah's supplications when he says, "O Allah, you are the King. There's no deity except you. You are my Lord, and I am your servant. I have wronged myself and acknowledge my sin, and so forgive me all my sins. Indeed, none can forgive sins except you. Guide me to the best of character, for none can guide to the best of it except you. And avert me from all evil, for none can avert its evil except you." So again, this tells us how that those names are so important in to strengthen our belief, to strengthen our relationship with God, knowing that he is the source of everything, knowing that he can bestow upon you whatever he sees you deserve, or maybe he is testing you, So if you remember, we said that if God's when he supplies you with all kinds of whatever you need, let us say with wealth, with beauty, with fame, with power, this is not usually the only way to show you that he loves you, that he cares for you. Sometimes such benevolence could be a test. So times of pain is a test, and times of also benevolence are also tests. So we need to be very careful and to ask ourselves, what is it that I need to do now? Right? Because now is the present moment, is the moment that matters the most. So it's either you have to understand the word now. So now could be a time of ease and comfort. If that is the case, then it deserves gratitude. Or now could be a time of test and discomfort and pain. Then sabr and patience and supplication is what is needed. And so on and so forth. So whatever your state is in the present, what is required of us to do is to ask ourselves, so what is required of me to do? What should I do according to my situation right now? And him being Al Malik, Wal Malik, Wal Malik, so he has it all. So whenever you feel that there's something that you need to fix in your character, something that you need to redeem in your relationship with him, the only source that you need to resort to is him, not yourself. So by that, we come to the end of our short presentation this time, even though we have 3 names combined. And even though those names are full of meanings and allocations and interpretations, but actually what is more important than talking about them is just feeling them in your life and to get connected with these names. This can happen in different ways, one of which could be by supplications and the repetition of the names. Another time is by asking him to bestow upon you, to open doors for you, doors of knowledge, doors of light. I love, by the way, the name, the light, An-Nur. The light is a name that is attributed to God, to his messenger, ﷺ, and to the Quran Kareem, right? So it is a big thing, and I hope, inshallah, that one day we'll be discussing the name, the light, and with some of its attributes, hopefully, inshallah. All right. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you enjoyed today's session just as much as I did. And I'm open to any comments or questions.
Alhamdulillah, it was beautiful. Your everything, I could just feel it as you were quoting some of the verses. It felt so good.
Thank you, Amina. Thank you so much. I always appreciate your presence, and I hope God, inshallah, will support you at those times. And inshallah, you'll always be there with your comments and your contribution, because I always like the way you actually, share with us your thoughts. Thank you so much. Anyone else?
Yes, I was thinking, is the session over with already? I enjoyed the session because it's really, really good. So, alhamdulillah, you explain all of that really beautiful. Thank you.
Jamila, and I'm sure you know what your name means. Jamila in Arabic means beautiful, and beauty has different meanings inside and out. So thank you again. Thank you so much. Okay. And I can see that my sister Sahar is here as well. Okay, so that brings us to the end of today's session. I don't know, Sister Laila, do you have any comments or messages from YouTube or Facebook, anywhere else? that time could be 10 minutes, that time could be maybe half an hour, whatever the time is. And during that time, you are completely focused. No phones, no messages, nothing. You're just there. It could be in your room, it could be in whatever place you like. Sometimes even in the mosque, they used to do that all the time. Sahabas days, the companions. But in our days, if you don't have the ability to actually do so, you can do it at home. But I mean, I have come to realize the importance of that in terms of enlightenment, of stability, of understanding more about yourself, in also the importance of it in terms of the connection that it builds between you and God. Is amazing. Also between you and the Prophet ﷺ, because if you sit there and you start, reciting and repeating some salams to the Prophet ﷺ, and with you knowing for sure that he receives them, that he hears them, that he actually responds to them, and that the fact that you realize this, it's not only that you believe in it, that you heard it, that you say, okay, I know. Knowing is one thing, and feeling that is another, and living it is even a third thing. So all that happens through al-khulwa, or that allocated private time that you take to meditate. And that in itself is amazing. I'm not saying that I actually that I'm doing this on a regular basis, but I have attended several, sessions with different scholars, and the same advice has been repeated over and over again. And I know that when this happens, it's a message. So I thought of sharing this message with you, and so that we can pray for each other, that God would open us this door, the door of khulwa, where we would have actually this time alone with Him, and that this is actually a turning point in our lives, I'm sure. All right. Thank you so much. See you, inshallah, 2 weeks from now. And if you have any queries, any questions, please post them to the Sister Laila. Thank you again.
Okay, one of the new shahadas just commented. I was trying to turn my mic on. She said, "MashaAllah, this was so great. She did not know that Allah being the king meant all of this." She said she has a question. She said, "Is it okay if she said, by me not understanding or just not learning how to speak Arabic, is it okay for me to ponder Allah's names in the English meaning of them?"
Very okay. God is God. He's the one who created us. He created our languages. He knows all languages. Okay, it's not only like that Arabic is the only language that he knows. Of course not. And he even can hear you when you're silent. He even talked to the ants and to the all kinds of animals and all kinds of birds. He is the creator of everything that we know and we don't know. And by creating them, he communicates with them. He knows them. He doesn't need even us to talk for him to know. He knows even without us talking. But it is us who need to communicate with him through words. He doesn't need that kind of, tool. So language is a tool. God doesn't need any tools. We need the tool, right? So that is why we need to supplicate, we need to pray, we need to communicate with him. So we're thinking language, but language is never a tool that he needs, subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Because he's the creator, he's the creator of everything. So it is us who need to communicate with him. So if you're asking, do we only need to communicate to him through Arabic, or is it the preferred language for our communication with God? The absolute answer is no. Arabic is not the only language through which we can communicate with God. Definitely no. You know what is the only language that we need to communicate with him? It is the heart. If we were able to clear this heart and to cleanse it, then will be the utter form of communication with God.
She typed, "Thank you so much." She said, "I feel so happy that I am now Muslim, that the Creator has guided me to Islam.
And we're so happy for that. May God, inshallah, bless you, support you, guide you, and above all, protect you, inshallah. And we're here, and the Sunnah followers, and of course, Sister Layla is always here to guide you. If you have any kind of queries or questions, always feel free to post them, because that is what this is all about. This is always about the kind of support and guidance that we can give for each other. We're so happy for you, sister.
Okay, yeah, that's all the comments I have here. Everybody else is just typing, thank you, beautiful session. They're typing stuff like that. They love the way you teach and all of that. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Inshallah, we see you next after 2 weeks from now and after 14 days. And if you have any queries or questions during that time, feel free to post them. And thank you so much for your time. Assalamu alaikum.